President Donald Trump speaking at the White House this afternoon. It's around 3:30 there. As always, he comes in to talk about one thing, but is questioned on a range of topics. He was talking about crime in the United States, talking about the crime epidemic in Chicago, saying he's going to send the National Guard. He also said he's spoken to Vladimir Putin recently and said there will be more information on that in the coming days. And there was a rather bizarre moment where he had to dispute reports on his health as fake news, with one reporter in the room asking the president, "How did you find out over the weekend that you were dead?" Always a range of topics when Donald Trump takes to the podium at the White House. Let's bring in our US correspondent, James Matthews, who was listening in from our Washington bureau. I mean, James, you always wonder where to start when you come to the end of a Donald Trump press conference. What were your big takeaways from this evening?
Yeah, hi, Sarah-Jane. I suppose that was, for many people, the proof of life news conference from the president, because we all saw, didn't we, rumours across the internet in recent days that there was something wrong with him, potentially, you know, trending on Google. Most searched was, "Is Trump dead?" The problem for him is that when you live stream your presidency, if you disappear for 2-3 days at a time, then that's when the rumour mill goes into overdrive, and it certainly did. You know, earlier this afternoon, he gave a radio interview, Sarah-Jane, and to listen to him, he sounded very croaky. So I have to say, on the back of that, there were questions going into this. How would he look and how would he sound? I think he sounded okay, much as he ever does. I suppose we can all make our mind up as to how he looked, what changes might there have been had there been a bit of hair dye, perhaps particularly on the sides, the tan topped up, perhaps. But he looked like Donald Trump actually looked during the week before he was posted relatively missing. But the spectacle of it all, you know, that reporter from Fox, how did you respond to news that you were dead? Whoever thought they'd hear that kind of question inside the Oval Office? And the same reporter doing that thing that we all do. Have you seen this thing on the internet? A video of stuff being chucked out of a top floor window in the White House, which I don't know about you, Sarah-Jane, but I saw it. I think we all have. And, you know, complete with showing the president this video on his iPhone. Trump dismissed it as AI, and I suppose we have to take his word for that. In terms of news, there was a bit of it, obviously. Spacecom, the US Space Command, the place that takes care of warfare in space, controlling the American military hardware high in the sky. That's going to be relocated from Democratic Colorado to red to Republican Huntsville in Alabama. The politics of war threaded through this Trump presidency. Interestingly, he said one of the problems with Colorado is that they have mail-in voting. Not the first time we've heard that. It won't be the last. Opponents will say this amounts to extortion, basically jobs and money to a red state, taking it away from a blue state because of its politics, because of the way it operates its politics. Ukraine was touched on. He said this: "I have learned things that are very interesting. You'll find out in the next few days." He was a bit vague on what that would mean. We're going to see what happens. I'm watching it very closely. So nothing of great substance in terms of Ukraine, Russia, where he's taking that. National Guard, he spoke about that, said that things had improved in Washington, D.C. Crime certainly down. He said you could go to a restaurant. Now, I have to tell you, restaurateurs would beg to differ about his assessment. They're saying that people are being harassed, that immigrants are being deterred from going to the workplace. A third of the workforce in DC restaurants are immigrants, and restaurants are saying, look, we can't get the staff, delivery drivers who we depend on. But that's DC. In terms of Chicago, he said, we're going in. Didn't say when, but they are sending the National Guard into Chicago, according to Donald Trump, in contradiction to the legality of it all, because today a court ruled that he was unlawful. Sending in the National Guard into Los Angeles was unlawful. That was a legal ruling. You'll remember there were protests in recent weeks. Well, a court doesn't like the fact that the National Guard were sent in. So Trump yet to square the legalities of it all in terms of sending in the National Guard, although he said that he had the power to do it, repeating that line again. In terms of other stuff, spoke about school shootings, said that he quite liked the idea of teachers carrying weapons. We'll see where that goes, but that was a question about danger in schools. Should the National Guard be sent in to schools? He didn't address that question directly, but essentially his line was about, or his news line of choice was about Space Command. Sarah-Jane, very important, hugely important in terms of fighting war in the future. Indeed, the Defence Secretary said, who controls the sky will control the future of warfare. That was a central news line for Donald Trump. He wasn't asked directly about the fact that there is much happening elsewhere. China, Russia, India meeting, which somewhat reduces this Oval Office news conference to a sideshow. He wasn't asked that question. You know, are you not reduced to a sideshow, Mr. President, given what's happening elsewhere, given the geopolitical shift that is demonstrated and reflected by the scenes that we are seeing right now coming out of China? That would have been the question for me. You know, a president reduced to something of a sideshow, and the follow-up question would be, well, what are you going to do about it?
James, thank you. James Matthews there with reaction from Washington to that press conference given by President Donald Trump just moments ago. Well, next tonight, an update on a story that we brought you yesterday evening. Our Midlands correspondent, Shamaan Freeman-Powell, had a special report examining the tensions in Warwickshire town Nuneaton concerning asylum seekers. During the course of her report, an interview that she was carrying out with a local businessman, Zahin, was interrupted by two women shouting and swearing. Let's just remind you of what unfolded.
Issue we have a youth in our country. You got youth raping our kids. This is our country. How about becoming your country and do that in your kids? Never going to happen. Never going to happen, mate. We won't do that. When we become your country, do that to your kids. We'll get beheaded.
You know,
these are our children. No, mate.
What are you teaching them kids? You're mouthing
All right, no.
Go on, say swear about Martin. Go on.
The camera's rolling.
I don't care.
Just relax.
Now, the gentleman involved there, Zahin, who was speaking to Shamaan Freeman-Powell, didn't himself want to report that or press charges or get the police involved. But tonight, Warwickshire Police say that they are going to investigate that incident you saw there. Let's speak to Shamaan, who is back in Nuneaton tonight, gauging reaction to her report. Shamaan, it got a lot of reaction, your report, because it summed up what is going on in the UK at the moment in towns and cities like Nuneaton. You explored a whole range of views. What's been the reaction there today to last night's report?
Well, it's similar, SJ, to when I spent a few weeks here in Nuneaton speaking to locals, a mixed reaction. Now, the whole point of this report was to try and get to the bottom of how people here feel about the increase of asylum seekers. And I think what that report found is that there is lots of anger and frustration. And I think it also highlighted what can happen when that frustration is misdirected. And it's now become the subject of many other news organisations picking up the story. So I was keen to come back to Nuneaton and find out how locals felt about it. This is what they told me.
I think it's just the same in every town, to be honest. I think it's just a global problem, not just a British problem. I think it's everywhere. So, and I don't think there's much we can do about it now. I think it's a bit too late, to be honest.
Do you think?
I mean, possibly, yeah. I mean, they're already here, aren't they?
Violence is never a solution. That's for sure. It's try to understand each other. I think that's the best solution.
I was actually disgusted by all the hate comments people are getting, because at the end of the day, immigrants are vital to our country.
Now, not only has it sparked a national conversation, but it's also highlighted that the issue is far bigger than just housing asylum seekers hotels, because here in Nuneaton they're living in residential areas. It's forced politicians to really think about how they're going to address this issue and where they're going to house the increase of numbers of asylum seekers coming here who will need to be accommodated for whilst they're waiting to be processed. It could also potentially force politicians to think about how they may well go about calming community tensions.
Shamaan, thank you. Shamaan Freeman-Powell in Nuneaton, Warwickshire for us this evening. Now, researchers have found that a 3-minute brainwave test could detect signs of Alzheimer's disease years before a clinical diagnosis is possible. Fastball, developed at the University of Bath, is a new method that uses an electrical test to measure activity of the brain by placing small sensors on the scalp. It's hoped that this test, which can be used at home, could be a cheap tool for those struggling to get a diagnosis. Well, let's speak to Head of Research at the Alzheimer Society, Dr. Lucy Devendra, who joins us now. Dr. Devendra, this could be a potentially exciting development in diagnosis, because I know you've got a report out today talking about the barriers of getting a proper diagnosis when it comes to Alzheimer's.
Yes, so as you say, we actually launched our lived experience survey today, which is the start of World Alzheimer's Month. And that really gave us some incredible insight into the reality of people living with dementia and those caring for those people with dementia. So that highlighted a number of challenges that we know exist within the UK, but particularly around diagnosis. There are huge challenges. Around 1 million people in the UK are living with dementia, but only around 2/3 of those actually receive a formal diagnosis. And there are many benefits to receiving a diagnosis. So the results from this study today are really encouraging in the sense that there could be some exciting new developments in how we diagnose dementia more broadly in the future.
Why is it so difficult to diagnose and get that official, definitive diagnosis? More than 1/3 of people, as you said, living with dementia in the UK don't have that official diagnosis. Why is it so difficult?
So to get a dementia diagnosis, currently there are memory tests that can take place, but also complex brain scans that can detect types of dementia. And we know that it can be particularly challenging to receive those definitive tests or those scans, for example. But what we also know is that people do fear a diagnosis. And we know that people, over half of people that we've spoken to, actually avoid going through that diagnostic pathway. However, what we also know is people that have gone through that pathway, 97% of people do see benefit. So it is really important that people go to their GP. We also have our symptoms checker on the Alzheimer Society website if they have concerns about their memory or their loved one. It is important to be able to access those diagnostic tests because it really does unlock the care and support that is available post-diagnosis.
Yes, we're just looking at some footage of that research there and the pictures of that brain test, that 3-minute test. It's hoped that that is a cost-effective way of getting an early indication of whether you're likely to develop Alzheimer's, as I said, years before you can get a clinical diagnosis. Can we talk about support? Because that's something that's highlighted in your report out today. 1 in 5 people affected by dementia get no support. When we talk about any kind of disease, we talk about prevention, diagnosis, support and cure. There are a couple of those that you can't have for Alzheimer's. However, support is one that you should be able to get. What's going on here?
Absolutely. So as you've highlighted, our survey looked at came the voices of around 3,500 people in the UK that generously shared their experiences of dementia. And as you said, what we found was actually there are a large proportion of people that have received no support whatsoever. What I would say is there is support available through the Alzheimer Society. So I would encourage people to go to our website, to go to call our helpline, to be able to understand what support is available in their area. There are treatments available, symptomatic treatments that can help people. And as you said, receiving a diagnosis and an early diagnosis is really important to be able to unlock that care and support that is available. So we know that there are huge challenges facing people in the UK today living with dementia, and at Alzheimer's Society, we're calling on the government to do more to address many of those challenges. And in addition, we have lots of support available through our own services, as I've said. So I think the survey that we've released today really does highlight the gravity of what's going on and the challenges that do surround dementia in the UK currently.
Dr Devendra, thank you so much. That's Dr Lucy Devendra there, Head of Research at Alzheimer's Society. Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much. Well, David is here with Sport. Hello.
Hello.
We're going to talk cricket. I was listening to a bit of this earlier today.
Well done. Didn't last long.
No, I was going to say this, one day against South Africa, a couple of early wickets for England. I then sort of tuned out because I had other things to do. And just looking down here, it didn't get any better, did it?
No, it really didn't. I think it was one of those where England got themselves into a couple of decent positions, but then it just fell away from them. So they lost by 7 wickets. The first ODI against South Africa at Headingley, they put them to about 102 for 3. Jamie Smith's made a half-century. It's looking OK, decent-ish platform. And then 7 wickets fell for 29 runs. It was over before you could even spell out the word South Africa. I mean, it was really quite an astonishing collapse. Then South Africa reached their target with almost 30 overs to spare. So, more than half their overs in this 50-over game. Aidan Markram, 86 off 55. So easy 7-wicket win. I think the context of this as well, England under their new white ball captain, Harry Brook, they'd won their first 6 games against the West Indies. This was really much them kind of coming down to earth with a bump.
Yeah, and there's a lot of cricket around internationally at the moment as well. And there was a lot of talk before the game about Sonny Baker, his big debut. I mean, it's obviously not gone to plan for him, really, has it?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, unfortunately for him, he's made history here by being the most expensive England bowler on debut in an ODI.
Ouch, that's going to be a pub quiz
76, yes, off 7 overs, so he went at almost 11 and over. It was really just pummeled. This one of the sixes that he got hit for by Aidan Markram. Look, he had impressed for Hampshire, England Lions, even in the 100 with the Manchester Originals as well. Here's another one, Markram going the aerial route. Look, clearly he has got some talent. He can bowl at 90 miles an hour. He can move the ball sharply in the air. It just did not happen for him today. Maybe a little overawed by the occasion. But England, look, they don't panic when it comes to selecting players. They tend to back them longer term. Next ODI is at Lord's on Thursday, and he's very much still in their plans. But nevertheless, England know what they're up against because they have lost the first of 5 ODIs against South Africa at Headingley today. Let's have a look at what else is making the sports headlines this evening.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
The club made a great pitch to me, that they wanted me. They gave me a 4-year contract. All the stops were out. They made me feel really welcome.
We arrived at the airport there in Madrid, and there were 30, 40, 50 journalists, cameras, and we thought, oh, they come for this movie star, Suddenly we see, Jesus Christ, Jimmy, it's for you.
It's always difficult losing a great player. Jimmy, for me, was always a world-class striker. Probably not talked about as much, I don't think, as to some of the others.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Now, a new study has found that Merseyside is apparently the funniest region in the UK, boasting comedians like John Bishop, Alexi Sale and the late Ken Dodd. The area was identified as the birthplace of more successful British comics per population size than anywhere else in the country. So what makes Liverpudlians so funny? Comedian Ted Robbins joins me now. So what is the secret to Liverpudlians being the funniest?
Hi, Sarah. Well, you mentioned, 3 great names there. Pardon me, voice. And I should put on the Scouse accent. Yeah, I know. I think a lot of it is to do with, it's not just Liverpool where they're funny people. I think it's to being with a seaport. I mean, if you look at Glasgow, if you look at Newcastle, there have always been great sort of melting pots for people coming in, people, bringing ideas, pop music, for example. I mean, you mentioned John Bishop, who's got the most Scouse accents I've ever heard. But, you know, there's funny people wherever you go. I mean, you know, the Billy Connolly from Glasgow. And I think that that's got a lot to do with it. And funnily enough, when I was thinking about this, I thought back to the Beatles, who had great senses of humour. And Jimmy Tarbuck, who nowadays, you know, people might not remember Jim, but I'm old enough to remember him. And he was like the alternative new wave of comics that came along, this cheeky Scouser. Now then, how are you? And, you know, he's like the fifth Beatle. But I always remember John Lennon at the Royal Variety performance famously stepped forward and said, now, and this was going to cause a bit of controversy. The manager, Brian Epstein, was terrified about this, apparently, but he said, I'd like your help with this next number, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Royal Variety in front of Her Majesty the Queen. And he said, could those of you in the cheaper seats just clap along? The rest of you just rattle your jewellery. And that got a great laugh, you know. And I think what it did was it popped the bubble of pretentiousness. And I think that's what Liverpudlians do and have always done. You know, there's no, if you thought to be seen to be getting a bit on, I nearly said up yourself there, I wouldn't say that on the television. But, you know, whenever, I mean, I feel a bit of a traitor because I live in Lancashire now for tax purposes. But whenever you go back to Liverpool, everybody knows you, even if you don't know them. And you go, all right, Ted, lad, how you doing? All right. Yeah, good lad, you know. You're not sort of getting above yourself. As long as you remain rooted with the people.
Relatable.
I'm sure that's true of many big cities. I mean, there were great comedians before you know, the ones you mentioned. Obviously, Doddy, by Jove, Mrs. You know, my act's very educational. I just heard a lady saying, well, that's taught me a lesson. You know, and Doddy studied laughter and he had a giggle map of the United Kingdom. And he said different gags. And he said, for example, I could tell a joke in Liverpool and nobody in London would laugh. It's because they can't hear me, you know. And Doddy would always fire off all these gags. But before him, people like Arthur Askey, you won't remember Arthur Askey, will you? But
no, I don't. I don't.
Yeah,
I do remember
he
Ken
was...
Dodd, though. He had the feather duster, right?
No, Doddy had a feather duster. By
yeah,
Joe,
that's what I mean. He had the feather duster, yeah.
Yeah. But people like Arthur Askey, Rob Wilson before him, the day war broke out, my wife said to me, what are you going to do about it? I said, well, we're going to march up and down by the coastline. She said, whatever for? He said, well, in case Hitler invades. She said, how will you know it's Hitler? He said, well, I've got a tongue in me head, haven't I? You know, it's kind of daft observational comedy. And, I mean, great...
Partly did wonder where you were going with that, because cheeky Scousers can be quite close to the bone, right?
The what, sorry, Sarah?
Cheeky Scousers can go quite close to the bone.
Well,
I was wondering where that joke was going.
Like I mentioned John Lennon before, they got away with it because they're cheeky and I think they know just how far to go, you know, not too far.
How comes Geordies aren't funnier than Scousers? Because when people talk about accents and they vote about accents, they always vote Geordie as the friendliest and often like the warmest.
Well, I mean, I only know one Geordie joke. What's the difference between a kangaroo and a kangaroot?
I don't know.
Well, a kangaroo is a marsupial from Australia, and a kangaroot is what a Geordie says when he's stuck in a lift. You'll have to think about that one for a while.
Yeah, I know. I was on the edge of my seat there, again, because we didn't run through any of these jokes before, but I know that you know to keep it on the right side.
But great female comedians, you know, Chrissy Rock, who was in...
Ted, we've only got 15 seconds, 8 seconds now, and I've got to say goodbye. Liverpudlians, really funny and really love a chat. Ted, thank you for joining us on the UK Tonight.
You're more than welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Cheers, kid.